Jackson, and we had two things happening in this chapter that we're looking at. Obviously, the presidency of Andrew Jackson, and then secondary, the rise of mass politics. You should also note that this is the first time that we've done one chapter. This is one chapter 13. So it should be sending little like ding, 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 slot machine. This is a really important chapter. Jackson's presidency is really important. He does a lot of things that will change political parties, and the Democratic Party will begin to resemble more like what we think of a Democratic Party. But this is my favorite part. There is a whole political party formed around the hatred of Andrew Jackson. That is power, baby, when you got a whole political party formed because they hate you. It is. It's cool. Like, we're going to form a party because we hate Andrew Jackson. It's called the Whigs. They hate Andrew Jackson. That's the only reason. They couldn't fit in any other place. So Andrew Jackson is important. Andrew Jackson also will begin to set a policy of how the federal government deals with Native Americans. Some of you might already know that about the Trail of Tears. We had yet up to this point never had really a federal policy on dealing with Indians in any way other than war. But now we're going to get some kind of beginnings of federal policy. And just so that you are clear that this is a federal policy that is geared toward minimizing the power of Native Americans. They don't get the right to vote until 1920, right around the same time as women, even though we'll pass an amendment that says if you're born in the country, you're a citizen of the country, they'll be denied the right to vote until I'm pretty sure it's like the mid-1920s. The second part of this chapter, which is crucially important, is that parentheses, the rise of mass politics. And again, when we talk about mass, that means the everyday, ordinary person. And that's what's going to make the United States really different than other countries, particularly countries in Europe, where mass politics is going to take some time to develop, almost into the 20th century. So Jackson is able to do that with this persona that he projects of this average everyday man, which he's not a common man. He's wealthy. He has a very large plantation and estate. He has slaves. But he is really good at projecting what he knows that the common man wants to see. He's going to, on his inauguration day, he's going to open up the White House. It's the people's house. And many people go in and on the verge of actually, I don't want to use the word destroy because that's a fairly strong, but they are certainly vandalists of the White House, ripping wallpaper off the wall to take as souvenirs, cutting parts of the curtains to take home. He just basically opens the door to the White House and lets everyone in. He loves it. He thinks it's awesome. Obviously, a lot of people don't, because they form a political party about the hatred of Andrew Jackson. So it's one of my favorite chapters, in particular, just because, not that I am at all of a big fan of Andrew Jackson. He's a weird kind of president. He does, and I think this is a president that you certainly can see that you can't look at a president black and white. They are very in the middle gray, because he does great things to enhance the power of the federal government and to care for the votes of the common man. But then at the same time, he's going to destroy the Bank of America and send us into the Bank of the United States, and send us into a horrific panic. So we're looking at, on that very first page, this idea of new democracy. Prior to 1920, in order to get elected, you really didn't have to appeal to people. The only people that were really part of that election were the House of Representatives. So just as a reminder, the House of Representatives was the only one elected. The senators were appointed by state legislatures. So the New York state legislature appointed their two senators. So they didn't have to, those two senators didn't run for an office. They didn't have to appeal to people for any votes. And for the most part, 1B, high offices held by wealthy citizens. And those wealthy citizens controlled most of politics. And again, what that means is most often their concern was for things that impacted them as wealthy citizens. So we begin having this change. Jefferson's going to get it a little bit and work towards it, but he had so many other things happening in his presidency, keeping us out of war, pirates, embargo, all of those things, that he wasn't able to really drill down as much as he wanted to. But this idea of Jefferson's democracy, the people should be governed as little as possible. That's what Jefferson says. The government that governs least governs best. That's Jefferson. Jackson takes that and kind of drills it down to say government should be done directly by the people. So we're turning that into the idea that it's not necessarily governs least, because you still got wealthy people with that. Really what it should be is done directly by the people. And this begins this idea based on universal white manhood suffrage. And what that means is every man, white man, should be able to vote, regardless. Now, what is the regardless? Most of it is regardless of property. That was usually the key voting distinction, is that you had to own property. And reason being is that the belief was if you had property, you had ownership of something, you would care more about finding out the ins and outs of the election rather than just going and casting a ballot. I know it sounds very undemocratic to say that only people who had property could vote, but at that time, it made sense to them that you had some vested interest in that election because you were a property owner. And asterisk, that's why so many people came. One of the reasons so many people came to the United States was that property qualification aspect was never, ever, ever, ever going to be offered to them in Europe. And they could do that here in the United States. So now that they removed that property qualification, the common man became more influential. And what we'll find in 20 years, by 1840, we will have political campaigns that are devoted to appealing to the common man. And the first person that's going to do that is William Henry Harrison with his log cabin and cider. This idea of, and all of us from Indiana should know that William Henry Harrison did not grow up in a log cabin. He's got a great big old house in Vincennes. He certainly was not this common man living in a log cabin that he built. And hard cider is not the apple cider that you drink. Cider is an alcoholic beverage. So the first presidential election where a presidential candidate tries to appeal to that common man will be the election of 1840. And it comes again right after Jackson. So what is happening with that common man is our part of the country. Between 1812 and 1821, 6 new Western states. And again, Western states are going to be Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, I think Michigan, not West like California West. Between 1810 and 1821, 4 Eastern states significantly reduced their voting requirement. However, by 1860, and we're going to keep seeing that 1860 date a lot as we move closer to 1860, because that is our dividing. United States history is divided by the Civil War. So if you go to IU, Notre Dame, Purdue, and you look at the history department is History 101, which is what we're taking right now, History 101, and at Ivy Tech is Colonial America to the Civil War. History 102 is Reconstruction to current. That's what's History 1 and 102. Any institution in the United States of America divides U.S. history by the Civil War, which now I feel really sorry for all of us that have to teach History 102 because stuff keeps getting added to us. Can't add anything to History 101. History 102 keeps getting harder and harder to teach as we keep tacking more history. So by 1860, only New England states still allowed blacks to vote in the North. They will be allowed. It will be difficult, but they are allowed. It should not in any way come to you as a surprise to know that the South was the last region to grant universal white manhood suffrage. And that's, again, the emphasis on white. That being said, the South system required there to be animosity between poor white people and slaves. That is the setup for generations. And the reason being, and once we get close to 1860, we'll see, because there will be several Southern writers that will appeal to poor white Southerners, saying the reason you're poor white Southerners is because these rich people get free labor. If you get free labor, you're never going to have jobs. And that will be the appeal that many Southerners will make. White, rich plantation owners need to keep that separate and not allow poor white men the availability to vote. And that will last for a really, really long time, trying to keep people to vote. New voters now begin demanding politicians that would represent common people's interest. And this is where we're moving to that Jacksonian democracy. Jackson was a result of new democracy, not the cause of it. And that's a clear distinction. We already have this idea of new democracy. Jackson becomes who he is because of that new democracy. Number 6 is something that I'm putting in here way ahead of time. Way ahead of time. We're not really going to talk about Frederick Jackson Turner until we get to the 1890s, because that's when he writes this. But it's really important to already start thinking about what Frederick Jackson Turner says. Frederick Jackson Turner writes about, his thesis is the significance of the frontier on American history. And his thesis is the extension of cheap, unsettled land in the West created a frontier society that shaped the American character, which was more democratic and more egalitarian. And egalitarian just means equal. It just means equal. It's a fancy word to say equal. So what Frederick Jackson Turner's book is about is that the reason that the United States was able to develop democracy, and the reason it developed so differently than any other country in the world, is because of this free, giant frontier land that was available and accessible to everybody. So that's what he's saying. So we developed this great American culture, this great American attitude, this great American democracy because of free land. And what this means, essentially, is that people could move and recreate themselves. My family could start off as Puritans in New England. They could move into Boston and become booksellers. And then the next generation, we could move to Indiana and become farmers. And the next generation, we could move to Nebraska and become sodbusters. That generational shift that allows this movement of America and its democracy and its culture is that rich part of the American culture. It's awesome. The reason that we're going to hit this again is in 1890, we don't have any more frontier. And Frederick Jackson Turner is going to say, what the heck? Now what? We've already explored. Where do we go next? So that's where we'll really talk about him a lot. But I do want you to know that this frontier, and the frontier really means anything on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. This whole big open stuff is what we call the frontier. So as a result of that, we're going to have the beginnings of more political parties. And I already spoiler alerted my favorite one, but we don't listen to our really intelligent first president about political parties, and we just start making a whole bunch. In this chapter, we're going to have the political party that hates Andrew Jackson. We're going to have my political party. I don't like their ideals, but I certainly like saying the name of their political party, the Know Nothings. The Know Nothings are racist people. And that's the whole purpose of their political party, is they want to keep out everyone who is not a nativist, meaning born in the United States of America. Know Nothing party. At this point, I'm going to pause before we get into political parties. If you are searching for a really good movie to watch, and I really, every APUSH year, like really, really, really push this movie hard, and nobody likes it. I even watch it, and it has the guy I hate so much on it, Leo DiCaprio. It's called Gangs of New York. Anybody seen Gangs of New York? It is a fantastic movie. No, we can't watch it on movie night because it has naked girls in it. No intimacy. No, they're just naked girls at a brothel, just standing around being naked. And it shows everything, so we can't watch it. But I keep talking about it, which stop talking, Mrs. Norris. But the movie is about New York City, and it is this time period. It's getting ready to move into the Civil War. It has nativists. It has the Know Nothing Party. It has the Irish moving in and the hatred of the Irish. It has my favorite actor of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis. It has the one I hate the most of all, Leo DiCaprio. It has, I think her name is Cameron Diaz. Is she the blonde chick with the really big smile? Cameron Diaz. It has at the end of it, what is it? Are you laughing how I described her? Okay. I don't know all these new people. They're not new, but I don't know all these people. And the end of a movie has somebody getting a haircut, and then they get a giant axe planted in their skull.
We just watched that one.
It is. It's a great movie. It shows up on TBS a lot, but as we move through this chapter and you pay attention, because they're a member of the Know Nothing Party, Boss Tweed is in that movie. It's a really good movie. I've yet to find anybody that likes it, so be warned, but it's good. It's a very good movie. All right, so now we're going to talk about parties, political parties. And the first one we're going to look at is working man's political parties. These first political parties about working man's parties, and these will be geared around certain issues. So for working men, obviously, it's going to be about issues in the workplace. Laborers in the East formed organizations that demanded free education for their children, a 10-hour workday, and an end to debtor's prison. None of those, I would think, appear to be outrageous or outlandish to any of us, except they want a 10-hour day. I think for most of us, that would be a long day, especially if you're a laborer, right? This is not people sitting behind desks. These are people that labor. A typical work week was 6 days a week. Because in the 1820s, we don't obviously have any electricity, your job would be sun up to sundown. So you can see how that obviously is more hours than 10. And the fact that they're arguing for a 10-hour workday infers that their work days were much longer. It's also important to know that they want education for their kids. They're already understanding the importance and significance of education for their children, be it to become part of the workforce or to improve on their life. And then the third one, which I think in the time, I'm going to start using this because I like it, in the time of COVID, what some of us teachers have felt that when there was a big push to open schools because parents needed to get back to work, I'm not a babysitter. That's not my job to babysit your kids because you need to go to work. That's also a part of it, is a place for their kids to go. But for the most part, again, it's that New England recognition that education is important. Now, some of these groups are going to be very violent. These are, again, rough men, and they will be very violent. My favorite, Locos Focos. They are very radical. They will resort to violence in many places. They're going to be absorbed into the Democratic Party. And the top of page 2 is our causes of new democracy. And on the top of page 2, we have another panic. This panic is going to happen after the War of 1812. And workers and farmers blamed bankers and speculators for foreclosures on their farms. So why would they do that? So we talked already about speculation. So the Panic of 1819 is caused by speculation. If I'm a banker and I'm going to make this half of the room, you guys are farmers. You have borrowed money from my bank, you're farming, and at the end of every season, you come and pay off a part of your debt. That's the way that worked. You don't pay a monthly mortgage because you don't get money monthly, but that's the way that works. At the end of the growing season, you come and you pay me a certain amount on your bank note that I have because you borrowed money for your farm, or you borrowed money for anything. Maybe you own the land, but you borrowed money for seed. In some way, you're indebted to me. You guys are speculators. As more people move out to the West, you know more people are going to need land. And so speculators want to be the first one in on the action. So you guys went out, let's make it Illinois. You guys all went out to Illinois and bought up a whole bunch of land. As the banker, I've lent you the money. But you can't sell that land fast enough, and I come to you to ask for the money. And you simply say, I don't have it. I don't have the money. And then you leave. I can't find you. This is 1820. I don't have a tracking system. I don't have a computer to find you. And you leave. You speculated. You just pick up and move somewhere else. That's Frederick Jackson Turner saying that's the awesomeness of the frontier. You guys have stayed. I got to get my money back. So because I did banking that was in itself speculative and not based on sound financial or accounting principles, I am now in trouble. So how am I in trouble? Because I loaned you money and you left? Let's pretend this word was here. These are my depositors. They're the ones that put the money in the bank that I lent to you. And now they want their money. And I don't have it because I lent it to you and you didn't pay me back. So where can I go to get it? Them. And so I start foreclosing and taking your land so I can sell good farmland. I can't sell wide open acres in Illinois. Does that make sense? That's how that works. That's how the banking system becomes for poor men and for working class people more of a something that farmers can always point to as why things are bad for me. There's no regulation. I can open a bank anywhere. I'm not accountable to anybody. There's no financial systems. That's not going to come until we get to the 20th century to do that. So I don't have to follow sound accounting principles. I can lend more money than I have. And so that's going to be to Andrew Jackson's benefit because he's got a whole bunch of people that are mad at something and he's going to take on that cause. Answer was to get more politically involved, and these are going to be Jackson's first group of followers. He is going to make it his mission to kill the Bank of the United States of America. Hence, for those of you that have stared at the irony is Jackson on a central banknote for 3 years. This is why. Andrew Jackson hates the bank. Andrew Jackson kills the Bank of the United States of America and sends us into one of our worst panics. Probably if we did not have the Great Depression, it would still be the worst panic. And he wants to control the bank. And that is where our McCullough versus Maryland comes from, trying to end the Bank of the United States. Just so that we make sure that we know debtor's prison. I can send anybody to debtor's prison if you owe money. That, again, remember, that was a big part of Shays' Rebellion, those people going into prison. The second cause of new democracy is the Missouri Compromise. Northern opposition to Missouri's admission as a slave state made Southerners fearful that the federal government would violate their state's rights. Slavery and enslaving people were important to Southerners, and they felt like slavery was under attack. So the goal of those white Southerners, control the federal government to protect the South. So then we get this new political age. And we've got two parties. We've got the Democrats, which are really going to look kind of, sort of, a little bit about like Democrats today. And then we have these national Republicans / Whigs. And we're going to look in depth at them. Voter turnout is huge. In 1924, it's only 25%. In 1840, 78% of the population came out to vote. Now, as big as this election is, I don't think we're still going to be anywhere near 78% of the people voting in this election. As easy as many states made it to vote, I don't think we're going to come anywhere close. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think so. And this is in a time period where it was not easy to get places. It's not easy to travel by a wagon in Indiana in November and find a place to vote. They had to show up in person. New style of campaigning developed. This is my favorite. Banners, badges, parades, barbecues, free drinks. And we're not talking about Pepsi or Mountain Dew. And kissing babies. That is why in the state of Indiana, to the best of my knowledge, on Tuesday from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., you could not buy alcohol anywhere. To the best of my knowledge, that has not changed because of that. Now, those of you that sit in on History Club, you heard me talk about my voter fraud. This is why we know there isn't, because in this time, there was. Back to my movie, Gangs of New York. They do it the whole movie during the voting. Here's what they did. Their motto, the motto was vote early and vote often. And so they would get a whole bunch of men, send them in, vote, shave their beards, send them in again. Buy them drinks, get them intoxicated. Here, vote. So the last 5 minutes of class, I want to make sure that everyone understands what the voting process looked like in 1824 and in 1840. We do not have it's called the Australian secret ballot. That's not going to happen for a long time. Voting was done out in the open, and it was very simple because a lot of people couldn't read, a lot of people didn't know. So I have 2 giant pickle jars. Pickle jar here, pickle jar here. I have 2. I'm getting to sleep better. I have 2 cards that you can ask for. A pink card and a green card. And you're going to come and stand in front of me, in front of everybody sitting in Norris Mercantile, and vote. And you're going to be asked, do you want the green card or the pink card? Which one do you want, Johnny? You want the pink card? Are you really sure that you want the pink card? You're positive, because pretty much everybody around here is voting for the green card. And last time people picked the pink card, I think their fields got caught on fire and maybe a couple of their cows went missing. You're sure you want to stick with the pink card?
Maybe I'll go with the green.
Maybe you should go with the green. That was the way voting was done. Everywhere. First and foremost, everybody knew who you voted for. Second, the person in charge had a person they wanted to win. And it just made it very easy. I could have even made it easier for you. Do you want to live?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with the green one. Right? That was voting. That was the voting process. So that's real voter fraud. I mean, that's real intimidation. And that's going to last until we get to the turn of century and we get the Australian secret ballot where you can actually vote in secret. When we get to political machines, that's what we're starting to build with these political parties. We're going to build political machines so that certain political parties are in charge of the election. And so that's corruption. We're about to get into the most corrupt part of our history of our government ever. And so as a history teacher, when people, and I am not saying that our government currently is or is not, but I always laugh because I'm like, do you know history? Because there were some really bad people. Not that these people are good or bad, but we have some really, really corrupt government. In essence, government was controlled by political parties for a really long period of time. All right, we'll stop so I can get sticker time.